Okay, so there's this IEM that performs almost as well as the TF Forte. It's tuned better. It costs just under 2/3 of what the Forte does. Oh, and it's also from 64 Audio. Hey everyone, it's Chrono from the Headphone Show, and as you can see, today with me I have the 64 Audio Trió IEM, which retails for $2,299, so $2,300. Now, at that price, what you're getting is an IEM that is remarkably similar to 64 Audio's flagship in more ways than one. They both share the same set of accessories that includes a leather case, a 4-foot cable, as well as multiple sets of silicone and foam ear tips ranging from small to large. And build-wise, they're seemingly identical, sporting the same compact, lightweight aluminum chassis design, albeit in different colorways, of course. I mentioned this in my Forte review, which, by the way, I've linked in the description down below, but I find that this shell they use on 64 Audio's IEMs is one of the most comfortable I've tried, and that's because, as you can see, when compared side by side with the Legend Evo from Empire Ears or something like the Blessing 2, these make for relatively small in-ears, which I find makes them a lot less fatiguing to wear over extended periods of time. So if your ears are on the smaller side, these might be of interest to you. But let's talk about sound. What I find interesting about the sound here, though, is that a lot of the prominent features from the Forte's frequency response are actually also present here on the Trió. Yet at the same time, the Trió is an IEM that I actually found to be quite a bit more balanced than the Forte, and it's one that I could get a lot of enjoyment out of without the need for any EQ whatsoever, because it doesn't have one major issue that the Forte does. So the bass is still very present on the Trió because it's got an elevated but not aggressive bass shelf. And like on the Forte, there's some added warmth on the Trió's bass response due to the bass shelf settling at around 180 Hz instead of at around 100 or 120 Hz. So just like on the Forte, this effect is subtle, but it can still be heard. And well, you can see it on measurements on the Trió, like the one on screen right now. However, when we get to the mids, this is where things really start to shape up differently when comparing the Trió to the Forte. The problem on the Forte was that while the lower mids were rich and well defined, the upper mids were completely gone. I mean, absolutely zero presence in that region of the frequency response. That, however, is not the case on the Trió. Now, admittedly, the upper mids are still a little bit on the blunted side here, since 1.5 and 3K do dip by about 1 or 2 dB, but this is still not enough to make the mid sound recessed in any way, shape, or form, at least to me. So what really improves on the Trió when compared to the Forte is that the midrange is adequately contoured, with vocals and instruments not feeling awkwardly muffled or stuffy sounding. It's not a reference midrange, mind you, but it is quite a bit more natural sounding and, for my taste and preferences, a lot more enjoyable. Moving along to the highs then, this is where things are again a little reminiscent of the Forte, since the Trió also has distinct peaks, with the first one being in the upper mids to lower treble transition at around 5K, making the Trió a bit shouty in that region of the frequency response while also introducing some glare. And then again at 8K there is a peak there that introduces some sizzle and puts a slight stress on consonants, but it wasn't like super sibilant or anything like that. We're not talking biodynamic, right? One thing to note here though is that since the mid-range on the Trió is not recessed, these elevations in the treble are nowhere near as pronounced as they were on the Forte, so they're not as fatiguing to listen to, even for someone like me who is usually quite treble sensitive. Other than that, I noticed that the Trió has excellent treble extension, although I did find that the air frequencies above 10K were a little bit too energetic for my taste, which made vocals and things like cymbals glisten more than I would have expected, although this is more of a preference thing. As for technical performance, I honestly don't find the Trió to be that far behind the Forte. For detail retrieval and overall sense of image clarity, the Trió delivers performance that almost matches that of the Forte as well as of the Legend Evo. Now, I think really what makes the biggest difference in the Trió and Forte is the Soundstage. The Trió has a Soundstage presentation that for an IEM I'd consider to be excellent. It's up there with like the Legend Evo. However, it definitely comes up short when compared to the Forte, which has an outlandishly good soundstage with an excellent sense of depth and instrument separation, especially after EQ. I also found the imaging on the Trió to be not quite as precise as on the Forte. For music, it's perfectly fine, of course. You'll get a good idea of where things are coming from, but I tried playing Valorant with these on and I was practically throwing because they just weren't accurate enough for the application, though I guess I'm not really sure who'd buy such high-end audio equipment for gaming. Right? Before heading into the conclusion of this video, just wanted to briefly mention EQ. Like all other headphones I've tried and reviewed, I've made an EQ for the Trió. So if you're interested in trying these out, there will be a link in the description down below to a post I've made on the Headphones community forums with all my presets. But anyways, now to wrap up this video on the Trió, you know, I'm well aware that the Trió is a significantly less expensive IEM than the Forte. But honestly, if you don't take EQ into account, which I think that most people don't, the Trió feels to me like an improvement over the Forte. The Forte just doesn't really shine without the EQ being applied to it. At least that was my experience. They've got similar characteristics in their frequency response, but the Trió fixes the Forte's mid-range issue, making it a significantly more enjoyable IEM to listen to out of the box, again, without EQ. Sure, you give up a bit of the soundstage, but for just listening to music, I think that my nod definitely goes to Trió. And overall, it's an IEM I'd actually be happy to recommend if you're out looking for a really high-end in-ear listening experience. Anyways, that is all for me today. I hope you enjoyed this video or found it useful. If you did, do consider dropping a like. If you'd like to learn more about the 64 Audio Trió or many other IEMs and headphones, I highly encourage you to check out the review section available on headphones.com. For more headphone audio content, stay tuned by subscribing to The Headphone Show here on YouTube. And until next time, this is Chrono signing off.